Welcome! So have you ever found yourself sitting completely alone in the dead of night, just staring out into the absolute silence, and suddenly your mind hits you with the heaviest questions imaginable? In this explainer, we're going on a bit of a journey. We're traveling all the way from the darkest depths of existential dread, straight through to a profound, almost electric sense of cosmic empowerment. We'll be unpacking some of the most mind-bending ideas ever put forward by modern science, brilliant European thinkers, and ancient Eastern philosophers. Okay, let's dive into this.
You know how it usually starts, right? With that classic late-night thought experiment. If your parents had never met, where would you be? Now I want you to go even deeper. What if this entire universe had never been born? When we try to visualize absolute nothingness, that state before the Big Bang, where there was absolutely no light, no sound, no time, no space, our brains practically short-circuit. We are just so wired to perceive things that the very concept of a terrifying absolute silence actually feels like a kind of trauma to our minds. How did this massive, complex reality suddenly burst out from absolute zero? And who or what is paying the cosmic electric bill that allows you and me to sit here and take our next breath?
Now these aren't just random scientific queries, they are literally the ultimate mystery. To understand how everything emerged from that zero state, both cutting-edge science and ancient philosophy rely on a master key, and it's called ontology. Simply put, ontology is the philosophical study of existence. It's basically the framework we use to search for answers when both science and religion find themselves groping in the dark. And today, we're going to use this exact framework to shatter some very conventional ways you might view your own life.
All right, part one, existence versus true being.
To make sense of this, we need to completely shift our perspective. We often confuse the idea of existing with something much, much deeper. The 20th century German philosopher Martin Heidegger noticed a massive difference between saying a book exists and saying I am. A book is just an object, but the words I am, they carry a profound conscious weight. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the metaphor here. Think of your physical body, those 70 or 80 kilograms of bone and muscle, as a fragile glass light bulb. You can touch it, it takes up space, it goes to the gym, it wears nice clothes, it ages, and eventually, well, it breaks. That is simply existence. But why does the bulb light up in the first place? Because of the invisible current flowing through it. That electricity is weightless, it's formless, it has no color, you can't cut it with a knife or burn it. That invisible conscious current, that feeling you get when you close your eyes and just know you are connected to the universe, that is your true being.
So what does this all mean when we confront our ultimate fear, death? Think about it. If you smash a light bulb with a hammer, the bulb's existence is over. It's just shattered glass. But did the electricity actually die? Absolutely not. It simply remains in the wires, returning right back to the universe's energy grid. Ontology teaches us this incredible lesson. You are not the fragile glass bulb. You are the electricity. We spend our entire lives absolutely terrified of death, obsessively polishing our glass bulb, thinking if it looks good enough, we'll shine forever. But the moment you realize your true essence is that eternal current, the fear of death really begins to fade. The current can move from one bulb to another, but it never, ever actually dies.
Moving right along to part two, the reality of Dasein.
That eternal current is a beautiful thought, isn't it? But philosophy doesn't always let us stay completely comfortable. Dropping those comforting metaphors for a second, Heidegger used a very specific German word to describe the raw human condition. He called it Dasein, which translates to being there. But the underlying meaning is so much heavier. I mean, think about your pet cat. Your cat lives entirely in the present moment. It has zero concept that it will one day pass away. But you do. You are the only entity in this entire universe uniquely burdened with the awareness of your own ticking clock. You know your time is limited. And that constant underlying awareness of our own mortality, that is the absolute core foundation of our existence.
And well, to make matters even more complicated, you didn't even ask to be here. Heidegger introduced this fascinating concept of thrownness. You didn't choose your birth, your parents, your body type, or your native language. You were simply picked up and thrown onto the battlefield of existence without any prior consultation. Literally, from the moment you realize you exist, you are already hurtling toward an unknown destination.
And what exactly is that destination? Here is where Heidegger gets deeply, deeply uncomfortable. We usually think of life as a journey, right? And death is just an event that happens right at the very end. But Heidegger defines human life as being towards death. Notice how the timeline tracks every single breath, every blink of an eye, not as a forward step, but as a downward plunge. Life isn't a casual walk in the park. It's a continuous fall off of an incredibly tall cliff. We are always falling. Every single breath you take is actually pulling you 1 inch closer to the inevitable ground. And this subconscious terror of the approaching ground, it's the hidden engine driving almost everything we do.
When that absolute terror of nothingness starts to creep in, we pull a very clever trick. We are terrified of being alone because the silence whispers, "Hey, you are going to end." So, to drown out that voice, we choose what Heidegger calls an inauthentic life by becoming das Man, or the anybody. We wear these comfortable little masks to avoid looking at our true vulnerable faces. We hide in the crowd. We say things like, well, everyone else is getting this job, so I will too. Everyone else is buying this, so I must. We basically hide in the herd so we can trick ourselves into thinking we are safe. But here's the thing. Heidegger isn't trying to paralyze us with fear here. He actually wants us to acknowledge the ticking clock. He wants us to stop wasting time on societal pressures and finally start living authentically. Which brings us to part 3. The burden of freedom.
Leaving Heidegger's sense of dread back in Germany, we cross over into the radical, rebellious ideas of the French philosophers. Jean-Paul Sartre completely redefined existentialism with a brilliant comparison. Think about a totally mundane tool, like a pair of scissors. Before a blacksmith even makes the scissors, the purpose, cutting, already exists in their mind, right? The purpose is defined way before the creation. Society and religion often teach us that humans are just like tools, created with a pre-assigned destiny. But Sartre argues that humans are the exact opposite. We are a blank piece of paper. We pop into existence first, with absolutely no predetermined purpose whatsoever.
So the crucial point is Sartre's most famous earth-shattering realization. Existence precedes essence. First you exist, and then, through your choices and your actions, you create your own essence, your own meaning. You literally have no pre-written destiny. That sounds incredibly liberating, right? But Sartre actually smiled and called it a curse. Why? Because if there's no pre-written script, then every failure, every sadness, and every mistake is entirely on your shoulders. You can't blame fate. We are condemned to be totally free, completely responsible for our own meaning.
This overwhelming sense of responsibility brings us to Albert Camus. He observed that humans are just desperate for inherent meaning. We search for it constantly in everything we do. But the universe is completely silent and totally indifferent. It doesn't owe us any explanations. Camus called this massive conflict between our desperate search for meaning and the universe's cold silence the absurd. To explain exactly how we should handle this absurdity, Camus used the ancient Greek myth of Sisyphus. The gods cursed Sisyphus to push a massive boulder up a mountain, only to watch it roll all the way back down the moment it reached the peak. He had to repeat this pointless task for all eternity. Camus tells us that Sisyphus is you. The daily grind, waking up, going to work, paying bills, aging, that is the boulder. But notice that absolutely crucial third step in the cycle. Camus says we must imagine Sisyphus smiling as he walks back down the mountain. The defiance is where the meaning lives. By accepting the meaningless nature of the universe and continuing to push the boulder anyway, purely out of your own stubborn will to live, you are rebelling. You are creating your own meaning.
And that takes us to our final section, part 4, the eternal cosmic play.
Now, let's guide our narrative upward a bit. Shifting away from Western rebellion, we actually find a surprisingly peaceful synthesis in ancient Eastern philosophy and modern physics. Remember that terrifying absolute nothingness we started with at the beginning? Well, modern science, specifically quantum field theory, tells us that the vacuum of space is actually not empty at all. It is a boiling sea of infinite energy where countless particles are constantly popping into and out of existence. What our brains perceive as a terrifying void is actually an endless, buzzing reservoir of potential.
But here is the really wild part. Thousands of years ago, the Isha Upanishad in India said exactly the same thing. Om Purnamada, meaning that supreme consciousness is entirely whole and this visible universe is also whole. The ancient wisdom states that even if you take the entire universe out of the infinite consciousness, the infinite still remains perfectly whole and untouched. Mind-blowing, right?
This realization forces us to completely rethink our ultimate demise. Death and silence aren't things to be feared. They are fundamental necessities. And this brilliantly illustrates that point. Could you actually read black ink if it wasn't contrasted against blank white paper? Could you appreciate a beautiful piece of music if there wasn't silence between the notes? No way! The nothingness, or death, is simply the necessary white paper that allows the black ink of your life to be seen and experienced. Eastern philosophy calls this grand design Leela, or the divine play. It suggests that the supreme infinite consciousness is essentially playing a massive cosmic game of hide-and-seek with itself. Let's bring back our electricity metaphor from earlier. That eternal current has manifested into your specific glass bulb, just to experience what it's like to be you. When you are stressing over paying a bill, chasing success, or pushing your daily boulder up the hill, that is simply the universal energy experiencing the total thrill of existence through your completely unique perspective.
So as we wrap up this journey today, remember the core truth we've uncovered here. You are not the fragile glass bulb that will one day shatter. You are the electricity. You are the eternal current. When your physical body eventually runs its course, your true self doesn't vanish into a terrifying void. It simply returns to the infinite cosmic grid. It was always there, it is here right now, and it always will be.
We've covered a massive philosophical landscape today in this explainer, from Heidegger's terrifying ticking clock to Sartre's absolute freedom, all the way to the boundless joy of the Upanishads. But I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Knowing all of this, will you continue to hide in the crowd, living an inauthentic life? Or will you look your own mortality right in the eye, realize your absolute freedom, and start writing your own rules? Think deeply about that. And be sure to join us for our next explainer, where we'll dive into the ultimate battle between consciousness versus matter and ask whether what we see every day is real or just an illusion of the brain. Until then, keep questioning.